All right, we are live. Post game. Obviously, I think a little different vibe here from us at least, from what we had at the start. FIU drops week zero opener to La Tech to a final score of 22-17.
Yeah.
Just kind of to go through kind of what we saw in the second half. Obviously, we spoke a little bit about that first half. Pretty good, really good first half for FIU. But let's just start with I guess the.
The positives, just start with the positives and then trickle down to the negatives.
I mean, I think we just start right away with
Yeah,
I
let's
guess
do it.
the how what's the saying here? The big thing in the room,
The elephant in the
the
room. The
elephant in the
elephant in the
room, which
room.
is Grayson James who went 5 for 14, 4 yards, one interception, 36% completion rate. Jake, I think the stat line speaks for itself. FIU did
Yeah.
not rely on the passing game whatsoever tonight.
That was that was a disastrous performance by Grayson. I've been a student since 2018. I've seen some pretty awful FIU football games in my time, right? But I've never seen a quarterback performance. And again, there's context to all of this because of course FIU had a pretty good rushing game, right, in the first half. That's what carried them. But in the second half, that was probably one of the worst offensive performances I've ever seen from an FIU game in my time, at least. Right? It's I mean, looking at the stat line, it's unbelievable. That doesn't look like a football stat line. That does not like something you'd see in a football game, regardless of high school, college, or pro. That is something you should not see from a division to have a quarterback that does that. Uh, it's surreal. Um, we're all pretty negative about it right now, Kevin. There's just not much to say regarding Grayson James other than that it is unbelievably is just a complete astonishingly bad first game for a season.
I think you could also add to it that, yeah, 4 passing yards. I think obviously we were doing some stat digging today throughout this game just because of how crazy it is. And the last time an FIU quarterback had the least amount, well, let's start off by this. Grayson James is now in the record books for the least amount of passing yards in a game, especially in a loss. I think E.J. Hilliard was the last quarterback in 2013 against Louisville. I believe they lost 73-0. That was the last time an FIU quarterback had the least amount of passing yards in a loss. Obviously, we would have had a different discussion if it was a win because there's still a stat for that as well. But either way, Grayson James is now in the FIU fun fact books, history books, in some type of category. And I will say, I mean, he wasn't able to get much going through the air, but he did get a lot going through the run game. And that's the other thing I want to get to, Jake.
Yeah.
Obviously, this I guess mostly the first half in the running game. Obviously, I think if we had to choose an MVP for the FIU side, it would be Shamari Lawrence, who had a
Yeah.
great first game. Last season, I don't think we did see much 100-yard rushing games. Obviously, Flex had a couple, but nothing like what we saw from Shamari. I believe this was all. He also had the longest run of the year.
Yeah, I believe it was like a couple of the longest run. Like there was no run FIU committed that was longer last year than was the 67, I believe.
67-yard touchdown.
67-yard touchdown run by Lawrence in the first half, which was amazing. The difference of mood in this room right now. For those of you who know, we've been chilling in Tamiami Hall watching the game. The mood in the first quarter of this game, and even getting in the halftime, unbelievable. Like we were watching. I put out on the Paws Up Twitter, right, that Mike McIntyre had this team ready to play in the first half, right? They looked good out of the gates. The defense was cooking. The offensive line of the running game was cooking, obviously. Usually you make adjustments at halftime heading into the second half. It felt like we saw the exact opposite of that today. FIU, it felt like not only did they not make any adjustments, everything about them downgraded. Their defense downgraded. Their running game downgraded. I mean, the passing game wasn't even there to begin with, but it's still downgraded, right? So, yeah, Shamari Lawrence had a great game, all things considered. 15 carries, 139 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's a pretty good stat line overall. That's a great stat line, as a matter of fact. But
like after that, it was just tough.
Yeah.
And it's hard to put this on the defense as well because, man, they played one hell of a game.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, you look back, you had the Deverick Daniel interception at the start of the game.
Mhm.
Then you had the forced fumble. You had huge third down stops. Obviously, you had that Bachmeyer incompletion. They got put on with a ton of penalties, and that kind of helped out FIU a little bit. It was just the offense not being able to kind of capitalize
Yeah.
off of those mistakes that off of those huge stops that the defense was ending up making, and I think that's kind of what cost them at the end. Obviously, Bachmeyer had himself not the greatest game ever. He had a great start to his career though. He got off to a very slow start. I think we mentioned that in the halftime
Yeah.
show. Obviously, he ends off the night with going 34 for 44, 333 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 77% completion rate. So
Yeah.
you got exactly what you needed from him, and then just you going down the stat line, you go to Smoke Harris, who had himself one hell of a night, 11 receptions,
Yeah.
155 yards, 64 going long. You can't be disappointed with the Louisiana Tech offense and how they kind of reestablished themselves in that second half.
Yeah, but I think overall, I don't think this loss with the stat line like Grayson had, you can't blame this on the defense, not one bit, right? Especially, I believe, how many turnovers? 2, I believe, right?
Yes.
They committed 2 on the night, right? One of them was returned for a touchdown, I believe. Not like a direct fumble recovery, but the drive turned into a touchdown. The second one was another one of those 3 and outs in the second half that the offense just couldn't do anything. 155 yards from Smoke Harris is good, but it could have been so much better because that's just the kind of player Smoke Harris is. He can average 200 yards.
And in all honesty, FIU really handled him very well.
Yeah.
Throughout the first half of this game, it just kind of looked like Smoke and that offense kind of figured out a little bit of FIU and what they were doing. And obviously, I mean, they handled every other player extremely well. They limited the only other player that had more than 30 passing yards was Allen on their side of on the Law Tech side of things. So, I mean, aside from that, you just gotta look at the second half, and that's what made the difference tonight.
Yeah, the first half and the second half felt like we were watching 2 different games. Like, I would say if we had to like give grades, the first half I'd give like an A minus. It was good, maybe a B plus, but an A minus. It was again, Grayson James didn't do much in the first half, but he didn't have to. Shamari Lawrence absolutely cooked, and the offensive line cooked Louisiana Tech's rushing defense, which is solid. We saw that last year when they played FIU. I believe 57 yards they only limited FIU on the ground. They turned that around, and I got to give. I will give credit to Mike McIntyre and the FIU coaching staff for figuring out how to respond to FIU's rushing defense because they made them look like fools in the first half. In the second half, Louisiana Tech figured it out. They found the holy grail to stopping Lawrence and stopping FIU's running game, and FIU had no answer because Grayson James was inaccurate. The receivers dropped passes, and there were some silly penalties here and there as well. Boy, there's I'm still like partially stunned, right? I'm speechless. We're doing a post game. I just don't really know what to say except that was a heartbreaker. That might be the most heartbreaking loss I've ever seen in FIU football, and it's the first game of the season, right?
I mean, we spoke about it. We mentioned this many times. We mentioned it in the preview. We mentioned it in the halftime. How important this game was for FIU in terms of just getting your season going. This is a conference game on national television, the only football game going on at the time.
Yeah.
And this was such a big game in terms of how the course of your season is going to go. And we were talking about just kind of, we were kind of doing our season predictions here, just us 3 talking, I think all of us ended up with 6-6.
Yeah, we all had different games that we chose that we thought that FIU would win.
For the most part, it was all the same.
We ended up 6-6. I was the only one that picked Louisiana Tech in this game, by the way. But you may recall in the pregame show, I think I picked Louisiana Tech 20, FIU 17. I was 2 points away, Kevin. I was 2 points away. But I don't think any of us thought this would be how it ended because – as crazy as it sounds, this was FIU's game to win. It was FIU's game to win.
They led through the whole entire game.
They led until the last, I believe, 2 minutes of the game, around 2 minutes.
No, not even like the last minute.
The last minute. Yeah. FIU This was FIU's game to win, and especially during that 4th and 4 on the last drive for Louisiana Tech, they had a shot to put the game away on 4th and 4, and they just let an open Louisiana Tech receiver on a screen pass just get it and get the first down, and that was it. Because I believe the next play after, or 2 plays after, they got their touchdown. So it's one of those like what if scenarios. What if they stopped him there? Obviously, the FIU would have won. But there were a lot of what ifs in this game overall, and just a rough way for this game to end. It's time is it? It's 12:56, and we're just sitting here pretty upset. Not gonna lie.
So let's talk a little before we wrap up. Obviously, obviously the loss, but go through tonight's game. We could start with the defense, obviously, which we spoke a little bit about. We spoke about this run game. We got to give some credit to the offensive line, man. I mean, wow, did they have a great first half? They were a little shaky. They were shaky.
Yes.
They were shaky in the second half, but when you look at the stat sheet, obviously what they did isn't shown.
Mhm.
But you just have to look at the first half of this game, and
Yes.
when our recaps come out, obviously I think the big thing will be looking at first and second half stats because I was talking to someone and he was telling me like just look at the first and second half stats and that's all you need to know for your recap, and which will be out either tomorrow, well I guess today considering what time we're doing this, but
Yes.
you'll notice. And obviously, when you look at that, you that first half, you just need to look at Shamar Lawrence. I believe they tied for most yards in the game. So, Jake, just let's talk about the offensive line before we wrap up. Really, really nice performance. I think I was a little impressed, to be honest with you. And I did talk. I was talking to someone, I believe, leading up to this game this week, and I was saying, if there's a position group that kind of is one of the more underrated ones, it's this offensive line with how good they've they've shown some good strides in camp. Obviously, you have a new offensive line coach.
Yeah.
You kind of seen that he's got him in check, and obviously that fourth quarter is kind of where it all.
Yeah.
You had the false start on everyone on the offensive line except the center, and then you had a couple holding penalties there.
Yeah. Shamari Lawrence, the offensive line, and Chase Gabriel, y'all get Capacitos. Good job. That was a great performance.
Shout out Chase Gabriel,
Yeah,
by the way.
Chase Gabriel came in clutch, former Paws Up podcast guest. The offensive line I think was pretty good. And even in the second half, the running game wasn't as good, but that's where the you generate processing from the passing game. They didn't get that because again, Grayson James had a historically bad night. So it's again, we can try to divert this one way or the other, right? We can sit here and talk all day. The fact of the matter is that what Grayson James did tonight is it's historically bad, right? This is going to go down in the record books, and it's probably never going to be beaten for a very, very, very long time, putting up only 4 yards in an FBS conference matchup. So, granted, it's only the first game of the season, okay? Yeah. There is time to turn this around, get to 6 wins, at least get to 4 wins to match last year, get to 6 wins against bowl game. But now there's a huge question. There was an elephant in the room. Now there's a blue whale in the room. What do you do against Maine in the quarterback room? Do you give Grayson James another shot to redeem himself, or do you just move on?
This team feels pretty good with Grayson for the most part.
And
we've heard this throughout all spring. We've heard this throughout the fall, that if there's someone that the offense rallies around, it's Grayson James.
Yes.
Obviously, I think this would be a great confidence booster for James, especially if you win this game against Maine next Saturday. Especially the home opener. You have your fans at the cage. It's a perfect opportunity. Now, I don't think Grayson will struggle like he did throughout the rest of the year.
Yes.
Obviously, there's going to be games where he struggles, but I don't think it'll be 4 passing yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think you'll struggle like that again. And that's the last thing I'll say on it before obviously we wrap up.
Yeah.
You have Maine next week. I don't think his job is in jeopardy whatsoever. I would say if he has kind of a similar game where he struggles,
if he has a similar game, he's done. We love Grayson James. Obviously, we had him on the show. He's a cool dude. We're rooting for him, but I wouldn't have blamed McIntyre if they had benched him coming into the second half. If they had benched him, I wouldn't have blamed him. Okay. So I'm sure if we go on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it right now, and look up Grayson James, his name is trending for all the wrong reasons. And you know what? We can't really blame him because this was A ridiculously awful night by him. Just overall a horrible night for the offense in the second half. A lot they can improve on, a lot they need to improve on if they even want to remain competitive for the rest of this season. And granted, they do have a 2-game homestand coming up. They can come back home, not have to play at 9 o'clock in the night, be in front of their fans, which of course we'll be rooting for them, right? So we want to see them win. And
So as Jake mentioned, 2-game homestand. You have Maine, FCS Maine, and then you
Yep.
have former Conference USA member North Texas. So
yeah,
two one should be a cakewalk.
you would think so.
You would think so, but
nothing is guaranteed now. From what we've seen, nothing is guaranteed.
just look at Bryant last year. I think that should
Right.
tell you enough.
Bryant was a scare. And of course, a couple years ago, Jacksonville State, which was an FCS,
They won.
came into FIU and knocked off.
Yeah.
Granted, it was the COVID year, but I mean, still. Yeah.
So I think if we had to say there's an MVP, I think it's Shamari. I think we agreed on that.
I'll give it to Shamari, or I'll just give it to the entire offensive line. One or the other. They both worked in unison in that first half.
Yeah.
The MVP goes to FIU in the first half. The FIU in the second half, I just hope we never see that again. I hope we never see it again.
I think, I don't think that'll happen again, obviously. And then, just we love Grayson. Let's start off by that. We think he's not only a great person,
Yeah.
but he is a really good quarterback. Everyone has their off nights.
Yeah.
And today was just one of those for Grayson, and we think he's going to bounce back, especially against a team like Maine, who has historically struggled.
Yes.
I obviously, when the recaps and when the previews come out, there'll be more of a deeper dive on this Maine team, but we would have to look back, and I think FIU's historically pretty good. Or this may be their first matchup against Maine.
They've played them. I believe they've played them a few times in the past, and usually, it ended up with FIU winning. It's one of those situations where an FBS team starts off the season against FCS, gets a free win. That isn't the guarantee with FIU, and
I think
man,
I think we can wrap it up.
Huh?
Yeah,
what a night.
Obviously, we'll have you guys covered. We have Jackson McConnell coming on our podcast this week.
Should be a fun one. I believe that'll be our first in-person episode of the podcast. Well, spoiler alert, but we have some awesome plans coming up for that episode. I believe on Thursday at 8:00. We will pre-record that. You'll see why when we get there. But should be a fun episode. We hope you all stick around. And through thick and thin, go Panthers, right?
Yeah. So as always, from Jake, myself, Johnny, who was in the pregame and post in the halftime show.
Yeah.
We'll probably keep doing more of these. We expect these to kind of grow in terms of production. Yeah. We have some cool stuff coming up with that.
Yes. We appreciate all the support on social media. We just hit 300 followers on Twitter. That's pretty cool. Thank you all so much who are following us and helping the brand grow. And what a way to start the season. I couldn't ask for a crazier game to begin this year.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It was a fun game.
It was exciting.
It was a fun game. It was a tough second half.
It was exciting. It became depressing, but there was still hope at the end. There was still hope.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. When you look at what you want from a national TV game, this is exactly it. And obviously, we'll be probably getting more info like when it comes to the ratings and all this and that. But this probably may be one of the higher rated FIU games we've seen in a while.
They were put on stage. They impressed in the first half and they laid an egg in the second. There's just not much else to put.
So as always, from Jake, myself, we said it. We expect these shows to kind of grow in production and how we do it. So from us here in Tamiami and FIU. We'll see you guys on Thursday. We'll have the pregame show on Friday. We'll have it on Saturday.
Yeah, like early Saturday.
Early Saturday. We'll see how that goes. And, Paws up as always.